The next two tools involve ways to prevent bias. One of the things stereotypes do is fill in the gaps in our perception. For instance, let me tell you about my friend Dorothy, who is an 83-year-old woman. If that's all I tell you about Dorothy, an image of her will start to form, drawing on stereotypes. She's an older woman, so you might think she's not very good with technology, and she probably likes knitting and sewing. When you don't have much information, the stereotypes fill in the details. But if I give you more individuating information about her, you'll learn that she was actually a pioneer in computer science back in the 1970s, and she worked on the predecessors to modern-day medical databases. You'll learn something about her that violates stereotypes. However,
I do like the song.
She does. That matches stereotypes, but it's an actual fact about her rather than an assumption. Dorothy hates the ways that jeans fit her, so she makes her own, and she has a brand label she puts on them. Her private jean brand is Calipegian, which is the Greek word for nice ass. Whenever I see her wearing jeans, I ask, "Hey, are those your nice ass jeans?" With just a few individuating details, you have a more fleshed out image of Dorothy. Some things happen to be consistent with stereotypes, and some things violate stereotypes, but they're all actual things about her. And there are fewer gaps for the stereotypes to fill. That's what seeking individuating information is all about. If you can learn more about the details that make someone a unique individual, it prevents stereotypes from filling in the gaps. This works as a preventative measure, but also if you find yourself having stereotypic assumptions about someone, you can use this tool retroactively to seek out more individuating information to push back against those stereotypic influences. Bias is more likely when we find ourselves acting spontaneously, surprised, or caught in the moment. But if we think ahead about how we're going to make a decision or handle a situation, we'll be less vulnerable to showing bias. For example, after Sarah's encounter with the doctor, she took time to think about how she'd do things differently. She decided that if she were ever in the same situation again, she'd ask, "Are you a medical professional?" Now, granted, that doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as "Are you a doctor?" or "Are you a nurse?" But that's part of the point. It's about slowing down some of the fast, automatic, habitual responses. She thought ahead about how she'd replace a stereotype. By deciding ahead of time how she wants to word that question, it will be easier for her to generate that response in the moment. Earlier, I talked about impression justification, where people valued men's street smarts or academic credentials more than a woman's for a police chief position. Well, in another version of that study, the researchers asked participants to think ahead before they saw the candidates. The participants thought about how important each kind of credential was for a police chief, and then made a commitment to stick to those credentials when judging the applicants. Thinking ahead prevented the bias favoring men. Because they had decided ahead of time how important the different credentials were, their decision was based on those credentials rather than a story built around their gut feelings. Thinking ahead will help ensure you don't fall prey to spontaneous biases in the moment. The final tool is to speak up when bias occurs. If you see something that reflects bias, or maybe you slip up and express bias yourself, it can help to speak up about it. When you speak up about bias, it reaffirms your commitment to combating bias. It tells others where you stand, and when done well, it can help to reduce that kind of bias in the future. How you speak up matters if your goal is to try and reduce bias. From this training, you've learned a lot about different forms of bias, but not everyone is aware of how pervasive bias can be. People will often get defensive and not hear what you say if they feel attacked. When speaking up about bias, people are more likely to hear you and take what you say to heart if, 1, you focus on concrete specific behavior rather than making abstract accusations about the person. 2, if the tone is focused on working together rather than finger pointing. And 3, if you offer solutions or explanations when possible. It can also matter who is speaking up. And here, the research shows that speaking up will have a bigger impact when it comes from someone who is in a position of authority, like a team leader or supervisor, or if the person speaking up is not perceived as a member of the group that was targeted by bias. For instance, If a white person speaks up about bias toward an Asian person, or if a man speaks up about bias against women, people tend to take it more seriously because they don't think the speaker is disadvantaged by the bias. Now, this does not mean that only people who are not directly impacted can speak up against bias. Everyone can and should, but it highlights that allies have a special power to speak up and be taken seriously. The thinking ahead tool is also useful here. Think ahead about what you'd say if you were speaking up about bias, and then you'll be better equipped when you find yourself in a situation that involves speaking up. Lastly, it's important to speak up about your own bias slip-ups, not just other people's. As I said earlier, breaking a bias habit takes time and effort, and everyone is going to slip up sometimes. If you do or say something biased that you don't intend, speak up about it. Say you're sorry. Acknowledge that you displayed bias and reaffirm your values that oppose bias. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. To be notified of when we post new videos, click the bell icon to turn on notifications. You can also go to biashabit.com to learn more, to donate, to sign up for our newsletter, or to contact us about evidence-based bias and DEI trainings. Thank you.